So basically, I'm going to be focusing in on things like proportion and adequate placement of facial elements within the head space. Both of these things are absolutely essential to know and understand before trying to spend time creating detail and things like shadow and light. So I'm going to be sharing my fastest and most basic way of drawing faces today. And along the way, I'm going to be sharing the most important things that you should keep in mind when creating your own portrait drawings. Before moving on with today's lesson, I just want to quickly mention something that is an issue for me. And I feel like maybe some of you out there have the same problem. And I just want to offer my tip on what I did in order to improve this. So quite some time ago, when I was first actually getting serious about improving my portraits, I ended up getting very irritated because I realized that at the end, my faces always ended up kind of skewed. And after doing some research, I came to the conclusion that it had to do with the fact that I was working sitting down and I was working on a flat horizontal surface. And this happened with other subjects as well, not only with portraits, but the thing is that since faces have to have some sort of symmetry to them, this was most noticeable in portraits. And so what I decided to do was invest in a little desk easel. And since I acquired that desk easel and started practicing on it, my portraits really started improving so much more. And I think in general, I just became looser and more confident in my line work overall. So if you're having this problem as well, I really recommend investing in at least a cheap desk easel. And if you absolutely can't, at least just try to work standing up. And take breaks throughout the process to view your work from a distance and at the actual angle that it's meant to be seen at the end. Alright guys, so here's what I do. I start out by drawing a circle, and then beneath that circle I draw a line that is going to represent the bottom of the chin. Usually, to know where to place this line, I divide the length from the top to the bottom of the circle and divide it into 3 parts. I then take approximately 1/3 of that entire distance, place it beneath my circle, and that is where I'm going to draw the line of the chin. Then what I do is it's time to connect the sides of the circle to the sides of that line that represent the chin. These lines, of course, are going to have a slant to them. But this is a point at which you have to do some experimentation and you have to decide for yourself what type of face shape or head shape you want your character to have. There are tons of different face shapes that exist. This is just the general shape that I have come to like myself for my own drawings. But perhaps for you, you like pointier chins or rounder faces. This is up to you. And if and when you actually get to a point at which you're drawing a specific person, you're then going to, of course, modify that head shape and modify those eyes and that nose and that mouth, depending on what that person actually looks like. But today, we're going through the general guidelines in order to better understand general facial proportions so that you're at least drawing faces in a believable way, so that you are then able to build up from this knowledge. This is absolutely fundamental for you to know. Okay, so once we have arrived at the head shape of our liking, it's time to start adding in our guidelines. These guidelines are going to help us visualize where our facial elements are going to be placed. It's important for you to add these lines lightly because you're going to have to erase them later on. You're going to draw a vertical line straight down the middle of the face and a horizontal line straight across the middle of the face so that you're left with a cross. You can help yourself with a ruler if you need to. But it's extremely important that this cross is right in the middle of your face, lengthwise and widthwise. The third guideline that we're going to be placing is going to tell us where the tip of the nose is going to be located. And to place this guideline, you're going to have to divide the bottom half of the face into half again. And finally, to add in the fourth horizontal guideline, which is going to be representing the mouth, what I do is I take the distance between the nose line and the chin, divide it in half, and place it a smidgen above the half point. Okay, I hope you're following me so far. Once I have added in my horizontal guidelines, it's time for me to add in some vertical little guidelines that are going to tell me where my eyes are going to be placed. And remember guys, the reason why we are taking time measuring out and placing these guidelines is because if your individual facial elements are not in their appropriate sizes and not in their appropriate locations within the head shape, your portraits are going to be slightly off. Soon enough, after doing some practice, these measurements are going to come more naturally to you and you're going to be able to do them faster. But it's important that you understand these things. So in order to be able to add in eyes that are more realistic in terms of size, what you're going to do is divide your middle horizontal line into 5 equal parts. A total of 5 eyes should be able to fit widthwise along this line if you place them side by side. But what is even most important is to make super sure that one eye could be able to fit in between the 2 eyes that you're going to be drawing. This is going to ensure that your eyes aren't too far apart or too close together. Once I have created these little marks that are going to tell me where my eyes are going to be placed, what I do is I extend the 2 little lines that represent where my tear ducts or the inner corners of my eyes are going to be. I bring these downward and connect them with the nose line because these lines, these new vertical lines, are going to tell me where the sides of my nostrils are going to be. So now is the point at which I start actually adding in my individual facial elements, and you're going to notice that I initially draw my eyes very geometrically. I like just blocking in my general shape and polish them later on throughout the process. And now it's time for the nose. This is probably the facial element that took me the most getting used to drawing. And I'm going to show you the technique that helped me visualize noses a lot better in order to be able to draw them. So basically, what I do to draw my noses is I draw 3 circles. 1 middle circle with 2 smaller circles on the sides. And the middle circle is going to represent the tip of the nose, while the ones on the sides represent the nostrils. So lastly, it's time to start adding in the mouth. And before I do this, I bring down a couple of vertical lines from basically the middle of my eye downwards. And these lines are going to tell me where the corners of my mouth are going to be located. At this point, I don't really need my guidelines anymore, so I erase them very carefully. Now is the time at which I go back into my eyes to start adding in details. And since this is a faster sketch, I'm just going to tell you what the basic elements are that I always make sure to add into my eyes so that they look believable. So for my eyes, the things that I always make sure to add are my tear duct in the inner corner of my eye. I also add in a tear line along the bottom of my eye. And I always make sure to add in at least some amount of crease line showing above my eye. And of course, I also add in my iris and my pupil. And something important to know here is that there is nearly never a point at which your entire iris is going to be completely visible in a believable face. Maybe if it's a cartoon, it can be, but if you try to do this in a portrait, your portrait is going to end up looking very surprised. So what I do is that I always have it partially covered up by either my top or my bottom eyelid. So yes, always make sure to add in these little individual eye elements, the tear duct, the tear line, the crease line, the pupil, and the iris, because all of these things are going to be visible at least a bit in any person or any face that you see. And of course, it's going to depend on the person's eye shape and the head angle, but all of these things are always going to be at least slightly visible in a believable eye. I also like making sure that I add in at least a little bit of reflection in my iris and my pupil, even in these faster face sketches, because this light reflection adds in a lot of life to the eyes. I also like adding in at least a little bit of shadow within the sclera, which is the white part of the eyes, and the iris, because it's important to remember that the whites of the eyes are never entirely white, and there is always at least a little bit of shadow caused by the top eyelid. When I was creating the eyes, I did my best to try to make them as symmetrical as possible, but I did run into some issues in regards to what I was talking about in the beginning of the video. And it's very obvious with my eyebrows because they are not placed in the same location at all. And I didn't even realize that this was happening because when I film these videos, I have to be working on a desk on a flat horizontal surface so that I can place my camera above my work. So the final facial feature that we have to make sure to add here in order to make the sketch believable are of course the ears. In order to ensure that my ears end up having a believable size, what I like to do is I draw a little line from my outer corner of my eye outward, and this is going to be where I start drawing the top of my ear. And then I just make sure that I end my ear somewhere near the end or the tip of my nose. Alright guys, so the final thing that I'm going to add to this drawing is I'm going to be doing some very quick hair. And in terms of the hair, the one thing that you have to keep in mind is it doesn't matter if you're drawing a male or a female. You should always draw the hair going above the head shape. So always add a little bit of volume to the hair above the head shape. Okay guys, so by this point it's all you. You can take this drawing as far as you would like. I am not going to get into things like value and texture in this video, but I will in the future in another one, so stay tuned for that. Over at my website at ericalancaster.com, I have 2 different blog posts that include free downloadable worksheets that you can use to practice your faces with. So I have one that is intended for the total beginner looking to start drawing faces straight on like we did today. And I have another one intended for people that have nailed this already and are looking to start drawing portraits from angles. So I'm going to leave links to them below in the description box so you can go and check them out. Alright everyone, that is it for now. I hope you found this video helpful and that you're actually trying to draw faces for yourself. And I'd really like to know what part of drawing a face you find hardest. Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for being here today and watching my video. I'd absolutely appreciate a like if you liked it, subscribe to my channel, and see you next week.